Welcome, my loves, to Mel's Musings. Hasn't it little been a bit of a hiatus on the Mel's Musings? My apologies for the distance and the disconnection. I've been consistently evolving, consistently connecting, deeply involved with my clients, my family, and also some really deep inner shifts. So I felt like it was time to open my voice again and start connecting with you all and get back into my little Mel's Musings. And what I've really noticed, especially something that I've talked about for a long time, is our survival patterns. And the deepening of working with my nervous system has been actually quite profound. Working with my nervous system for me has been the anchor to the work that I started in my early 20s. Well, really my whole entire life, but definitely my early 20s when I started to find that facilitator path and open to breath work. And breath work obviously being a huge impact in this spiritual psychology behind the rebirthing that I was taught, really opened my eyes to the patterns and programs and family dynamics and belief systems that keep us running in survival. I never really understood it until I could master my nervous system. The awareness was never enough. The mindset and the understanding was never enough. And I couldn't figure out how to navigate the deep emotions that I consistently felt. And when they come up, I felt like I was out of control. It felt like some of these emotions that were hitting my heart were like a death. And what I realized is they really were. The patterns and programs that my nervous system ran when these feelings came into my awareness did feel like a death, because when I felt them before, the aloneness and the identity that held that together was deeply wound into and wired into my nervous system, especially from that 0 to 6 stage in my life. So when we're from that 0 to 6, a lot of what we experience and open to in our subconscious is around survival. The patterns and the beliefs that we take on through our environment, through our relationship, especially to our mother and our parents, really wire that core foundation of who we are, who we become in reflection to the world. Are we securely anchored in our own self, or are we adapting to the patterns in our life to stay safe? We're adapting to the person that is our caretaker's nervous system to stay consistently present, to stay consistently safe, to survive in whatever they're navigating, because we don't really have the logical understanding, but we can feel it emotionally because we're an open little sponge. And I think the more and more I have worked with this profoundly deep understanding of myself in that time, especially in relationship to my mum, and I think that really deepened after she passed, because when that portal closes through death, I think there's an absence of something. It's like that was your portal here as your human soul into this lifetime now. And when that shuts, in a sense, there's a real disconnection of, wow, I'm really doing this alone. I am where I was anchored in, however that was anchored, is no longer. Does that identity still work for me? Does that way I relate to myself, because I've taken on those internal patterns and dialogue and belief systems, especially from my mother, because that DNA is in my system. Those thoughts become mine. The way she loved or couldn't love became the relationship with myself, to myself. And the more and more I related that to my nervous system, the more and more I could separate myself from the stories in my mind that protected me and kept me in story, kept my nervous system activated. The more I stayed wound in that sort of chaos, the more I was victim to any emotion that hit my body. It would go into fear and amplify whatever I feared, and the thoughts would run down this chemical pathway of chaos. And the more and more I got to quieten my mind and become this observer of all the negative self-talk, the way that my body felt in reaction to situations, circumstance, relationships, and even relating to myself, the more I started to really come back into the body. And the trust that I created in learning to attune so deeply to my body, what I recognized underneath all of these feelings were deep needs that were never met. And when I could become that person, when I could become that person that met these needs, it freed my little girl. Because the deeper I got and the more I unlocked in my DNA these memories, these moments in time that held trapped emotions, which is energy, the energy that was attracting my experiences into my now reality, were coming from the past. And then that fear that would come through when that would come into my field would then trigger my mind, because it was stimulating my nervous system to go into reaction to the feeling that was coming up. And once that wasn't safe to feel, but when I became my own safe place, then I built this trust that instead of going out into the chaos and believing my mind and looking for external validation, I went deeper and deeper in. I followed the cords back to my little girls and reclaimed them. And this has been a deepening, a process of evolution. And I know so many of you go, oh, I've done the inner child work and I've done this. But every time we deepen our connection, we also can hold ourselves emotionally in a deeper place. So sometimes we revisit moments in time. Sometimes experiences and circumstances come around again, not because we're going backwards, but because we can see it from a different perception and perspective, because our nervous system can hold more. Our nervous system's not only ready to release, but also to reclaim, to remember. And when we start that reclaiming and remembering part of self, we're opening and expanding our own DNA to remember beyond our human selves. We're starting to activate that connection to our soul self and above. We're activating memory of what we've brought into this lifetime, not only to clear, as in karma, past life that we've brought in themes, but also to remember what we're here to become. What our unique gifts that we have brought in, not only through our struggles, but also through our struggles, what that key unlocks for us to evolve into. Because once we can transmute that through the body, not just thought, we can't transmute anything through thought. We can think our way as much as we can, but it still activates the body in survival. We're still bypassing the present moment, which is the only moment that we actually have any chance of creating change. The present moment is our anchor. Because if we're predicting from the past to then go, okay, well, I did this in the past, I didn't want to feel this, so this is what I need to do to make this happen in the future. Well, then we're bypassing the present moment. We're bypassing what's activated for us in the present moment to reveal. So we're not always having to use logic to sort of move over what's present now. And what is present now is normally the gift, which is normally what we don't want to feel. But underneath what we are actually experiencing in the feeling and the emotion, if we can stay long enough in the body, we get to reveal where we're trapped, where we're stuck, where we fear our own self, our own shadows, our own spaces and places that we've deemed unlovable because it was never met. And really the parts that we feel are unlovable, that haven't been met, that hold on to these heavier emotions, are aspects of us, stuck in moments of time with needs that have never been met. but we can never access them if we stay in survival. So when we're talking about survival, we're talking about where we get stuck in the mind. That reptilian part of our brain keeps us activated in survival, like we're running from a bear, but the fear that we're actually feeling is running away from our own feelings, because we don't know how to regulate, we don't know how to stay with ourselves because of the fear of what that feels like. And some of those feelings that get activated do feel like a death. Because when you're a little girl or boy and you're in 0 to 6 part of your life, you rely on the people around you to hold you, to help you understand, to help you feel, to attach to them so you feel safe enough to move through the experience of whatever emotion you are feeling, to anchor you in, to know that you are safe, to then move on the other side of it, to come back into alignment. And if we didn't have that, we didn't have that safe place, that anchor, that we felt completely accepted, that love wasn't taken away, that we didn't have someone that reacted to our experience of what we were feeling, then we learned to adapt, we learned to suppress, we learned to bypass. We learned that that wasn't okay, what we were feeling. And the fear that we have in our physical body when that comes up and we know that we're not going to be loved, we're not going to be met, is really scary. Because if it's not accepted, then when we're not accepted, then that means our survival. And we need to stay close to the person or people, even if it's good or bad, to stay alive. So when we then come back into the body and we have got all these suppressed moments in time that haven't been met, it's scary. And I see so many people get to this resistance point every time they're moving into relationship with themselves that's been triggered by a relationship, a situation or circumstance. And for us right now in the world, fear comes up straight away. Fear that we don't trust ourselves to stay and hold ourselves fully to clear and transmute the emotion that keeps us trapped, keeps us limited, keeps us disconnected from our heart, keeps our armor over our heart. And the portal to ourselves is to clear what we deem unlovable, what we protect our hearts from. And so we manage that with our minds, firstly, and all of our coping mechanisms that we've created. People pleasing, over-functioning, over-giving, overdoing. It's this way that we have learnt to adapt to what we needed to do to stay close, but also suppress our feelings. You get to midlife, you get to now, that's exhausting on the body. There's a heaviness in the body that we can't move. There's a disconnected feeling that no matter how many books, no how many podcasts, no how much work we've done, you keep landing deeply in this same place that there's a really deep shame that there's something innately wrong. Because it feels like separation, that you're looking from this space that you can see yourself or this life or this experience you want to have, but it's just never attainable. And really what's disconnecting us from what's on the other side of that veil is your limited self, is your nervous system, is the trust that you have to move beyond the fear into courage, to be actually able to learn how to hold yourself lovingly through the feelings that are coming up. And what I find with a lot of clients, especially when it comes into relationship with their parents, is that there's a lot of guilt in going against the family nervous system. And why I say family nervous system is that's what we're wired to. That's what we're dependent on. That's what limits us, because we are wired to our childhood. We're wired to the family nervous system and how we learnt to survive in that environment. And whatever was accepted, not accepted, or however we had to relate or suppress, that all comes with us. And no matter how much knowledge and awareness we gain in lifetime of understanding, yes, we have moments of expansion, but when it comes back to the challenging times where our feelings are activated, we instantly go back into fear, and what gets activated are those suppressed feelings from the past. And what we have to do then is go into adaptation to suppress and function in survival to move through it. But we're moving over the top of it. We're bypassing it. We're not coming into it, leaning into it, understanding how to regulate. We just stay in management. And management, when everything comes at you at once, at some stage, it's all going to come out. We find our ways where blaming is easier, or that continual shame of not getting it right over and over again keeps you in this self-sabotage of self-doubt and negative self-talk. And until we become our own cheerleaders and we get really courageous and curious, we're never going to want to go in. We're just going to want to keep bypassing what's laying deeply on a cellular level in our bodies. What's vibrating and attracting into our current reality is in the cells of the body. And not only is that limiting you from accessing yourself and moving out of survival, but it's limiting accessing the remembrance of who you are on a soul level, why you're here, who you really are, the power we actually have to co-create with life, to see things beyond the small mind, in a sense, to open that higher heart and connect and change our DNA to have the experiences that some of us don't even know how to hold, because it's so far out of our reality and belief system that we could actually have that. Yes, we long for it, we desire it, we would love to have it. But if we haven't opened not only our capacity to hold ourselves in release, how do we hold ourselves to receive the fullness of who we are? That's regulation. That's regulation on a whole nother level of self-worth, of opening the higher heart with no outcome known, in a sense. And for the mind, that just, that blows the mind, doesn't it? Because the mind wants certainty. If I do this, then I get this. Well, when we open to receive, we have to totally trust the moment. We have to keep opening to the higher knowing and allow that, unattached from that, and then allow that experience to come back to us. And sometimes that's not in our human timing. It's not going to look about what we think we want, but maybe that experience that comes next to reveal the next experience of what we're ready to bring in is what we need to go through, to open capacity, to hold more. And we can only really do that and navigate this from the present moment. And if we're constantly in avoidance of self because life is pulling us in all directions, then we're always going to feel overwhelmed. We're always going to go back to the familiar. We're always going to go back to what we know, and that's our nervous system that's created in the family. Until we see ourselves in separation to our family, until we see ourselves in separation to life, our relationships, what we actually hold deeply as beliefs, programs, trauma, until we can sit back and observe the reality of what we do, not who we want to become, but the reality of how we relate to self, moment to moment, is the truth of really where we're at. And you will see that truth come out every time you're challenged. And it's not about being perfect. We're going to have human challenges. We're not going to get it right. But how fast can you bring yourself back into presence and alignment? That is how fast you'll be able to regulate and come back to source, come back to alignment of self, and come back to a creative heart that is going to help you see beyond the survival part of your mind, which is fear. When we can come straight back in, transmute what is coming through us, open our awareness to stay in our heart, to see differently what is challenging us from a higher perspective, it changes your perception to life. So yes, the foundation that you're creating through this work, nothing that I have done doesn't bring me back to this foundational self of my humanness every day. Because I'm having a human experience. You're having a human experience. We're not here to bypass all of that. We're here to feel through it, move it through the body, so we can really understand what separation feels like, what that duality is. But we're holding on to this idea that we have to stay close, we have to stay comfortable, we have to stay happy. We don't want to be alone. But alone is just the separation to self, separation to our higher self, our soul self, our closeness to love. And the more we're attached to receiving validation and love outside of ourselves, because that's what we got taught in survival when we were younger, if we're not willing to meet ourselves, firstly in building a new foundation, to then build a new identity that comes from a solid place of knowing what you feel, where it's come from, how to hold that, and then to share what you need because you've met the feeling first. Beyond that, then you get to co-create. Then you get to see beyond the limits of the nervous system, beyond the limits of the logical mind. And you start to open these parts of your DNA that are fucking exciting, that I never really knew I was going to tap into. But it's like I get these downloads of more and more understanding of why I've been so devoted to this work for such a long time. But for me, my gifts have opened and expanded more and more, that I have embodied and stayed connected to my heart and physical form. Leaving my body and coming back and trying to survive and cope over the top and trying to bypass what was here was actually keeping me stuck. And when I kept facing it, I was like so curious, and I wanted to dive into every shadow, and I wanted to understand myself and every pain that I had. I wanted to know why, where it came from, where I was stuck, where I was limiting myself, where I was projecting onto someone else my pain because I was too scared to hold it myself. And I kept going in and I kept going in. And the stronger the relationship and the trust that I had with myself, I kept finding more aspects on deeper layers. And that trust is now all of a sudden just found this really strong foundation that the receiving is powerful. And the remembrance is beyond what I thought I could access. And even in the challenges of what the world is presenting us, I can see with creativity my path without falling into survival. And as soon as I notice being in the collective, I've taken on, and that's activated anything in my physical body, I come back home. I come back to the moment. I come back to what I haven't served in myself in that moment because something I'm feeling is coming through. And it's normally activated from fear. So I come home. I move out of the thoughts that want to keep me moving down old familiar pathways, and I come back and I'm like, what is this? What am I feeling? Okay, I can hold that. I don't fear the darkness. The darkness has become my friend. My shadows have become the key to my freedom. And the more we avoid them, the bigger they grow, the easier it is to be tapped into and manipulated through our wounds, because we don't have the courage to go in and hold ourselves in those spaces, because we just want to stay uncomfortable. We just want to attain the love. We just want to attain the light. We just want to attain the abundance without actually asking ourselves, why haven't we got that? Because if we come here whole and we're already open to all of this, well then why have we created these limits? Why have we forgotten who we are? Because we're in survival. And that is our lesson as a human, to move through the duality of all that is. Good, bad, light, dark, happy, sad. But we fear the heaviness and the shadow parts of ourselves, that we deem them unlovable and bad, but we're here to experience it all. We are it all. We have all of it in us. But if we stay in judgment and the external blame, then it's so easier to make us, well, the mind wants to make us better than or more than. But when it comes down to it, we're all equal. We all experience this on some level for whatever path we are here to fulfill. And really, in the end, we want to change this world. And I know anyone that's listening to this has a deep desire to want to find unity, to want to find peace, to want to find connection, to want to have love. But that's an inside job. An inside job that what we feed or what we fear is actually what we are gifting to the frequency of the earth, how we're helping us evolve. And as things are speeding up, well, that's going to speed up the triggers and the things that we don't want to feel, which then if we stay in fear, then we're going to get more anxious, more overwhelmed, more consumed in our pain. We're going to try and function with every coping mechanism that we have created to survive. People pleasing, over functioning, overdoing. And we may have shifted that from unhealthy habits to healthy habits, but we're still managing ourselves, because as soon as a crisis hits, soon as the challenges hit, we fold back into the familiar. And you know what? For the people that have been doing this work for a long time, the shame that comes online for feeling like, what is wrong with me? Why am I here again? Is so much deeper and damaging than it is to be unconscious, just floating around in the ignorance of bliss, of not really knowing. And I know for those people that, fold back into that familiar all the time, it feels defeating. And I did it for a really long time on different levels, not in the wholeness of self, but aspects of myself will pull me back in. And then the more and more I've built this deep connection of alignment, I don't fly around in extremes and chaos anymore. There's a lot more of like, oh, okay, that was a bit off. Okay, bring myself back in. It's a moment-to-moment awareness some days, especially when I'm opening and downloading to more of myself. Things that my mind are like, what? I can't even perceive that. So that is my belief system that's keeping it limited. So I've got to go in and, where is that feeling? Where am I fearing this expansion? Where am I trying to analyze this with logic? And when we're opening to that soul part of ourselves, the imagination and that heart opening, and allowing that vision to become a feeling, becomes that sort of opening to future self. And there's a trust in that. There's a receiving in that. And I've found receiving self way more overwhelming than releasing, because I knew my shadows. I knew my pain. I was familiar in going into the depths and the darkness with anyone. I can sit with anyone in the darkness. The darkness doesn't scare me. I spent a lot of my life, I feel like many lives, in a lot of suffering and darkness. So the light and accessing more and more of it, learning to hold that truth of myself, has been more challenging than anything else, in the sense of really being able to stay and regulate and open to this expansion of love. And that tends to hit the nervous system the same way. And that's why we're feeling so overwhelmed, because the world looks like it's in disarray, but it has to dissolve, as we always have to dissolve identities to create and open to the newness of ourselves. So does the world. But underneath that, what is expanding, what is growing, is a new frequency for us to receive. And if we can't hold ourselves in the release, then we're never going to hold ourselves in the expansion we're ready to evolve into. And there's a really deep self-trust that moves beyond the doubt, even when No one understands you, because I'm not looking for validation anymore, and nor will you. I'm not looking outside of myself for proof, because I feel it within me. Even if it hasn't manifested in my physical life right now, I still feel it. I know it. I know my path so clearly now that it's like, holy shit, how could I have ever doubted myself? How could have I ever put myself in those situations of abuse and non-loving things, basically? I put myself through hell because my worth was attached to looking for love outside myself, for approval, to people please, to overgive, to overfunction, to do more, to attain more, to try really hard to be loved. It's fucking exhausting. And as I pulled the layers back and recognized this was a me thing. When I recognized I was doing this, this is how I was co-creating in my life with all relationship, especially relationship to self, then I was like, oh, the only control I have is through my own perception. And the only way I can change and expand that is when I work deeply with my nervous system. And it's a gift to get out of survival. It's a gift to get out of our humanness and to make space to hold our truth, our higher self, our soul self, and to really shift the vibration of our own DNA to expand, to open to more of ourselves in our human bodies. It's a gift. And that's where we get to co-create from. And the more of us that start to co-create from that frequency instead of from lack and from survival and from overwhelm, we can't be creative in those spaces. And I watch in my challenges how I can show my boys the difference in life of if I respond this way or if I react this way. There's space to respond. There isn't when you react. And when you react, you go down the same pathway. It activates the same wiring. It activates the same chemicals. It activates the mind. And we move further and further away from attuning to what we are feeling, moving through the fear of that, learning to sit in that and hold it all the way through so we can transmute it to understand and see it from a different perspective, a different lens, one where we can be creative, one that doesn't come from lack, one that comes from love and alignment, and something that's going to help you co-create what you want in your life, not what you don't want again and again. And I suppose that's why this has become so much more potent work for me as it's evolved and I've understood and, moved through death and life and challenges and loss. It's all of it. And I don't fear either. And I just keep opening to more. And then what I accepted before becomes less and less. And that version of me is not gone. I recognize her, but she's not me anymore. Because now I sit here in love of all that experience that I had that allowed me to access this. Not because I didn't want to experience it, but that experience, bad as it was in moments, allowed me to access the depth of connection to myself in love, the depth of connection in life, that I have resilience in challenging times, but I don't have to go into fear. I don't have to go into survival. I don't have to adapt anymore. I can just be with it. That resilience that I created from the depth of hell that I went through allows me to create the depth of heaven I'd like to experience in this human body, in this lifetime, for myself. And not only does that clear the pathway for me, it clears the pathway back. It clears the pathway forward. And for me, one of my greatest missions is to clear that pathway as much as I can for my part, for my children, for my grandchildren. And if I feel like I have cleared that pathway and allowed there to be space for them to move from fear and co-create from love and have a life beyond what I even can achieve. I want them to achieve more than what I have. Then I feel like that's complete for me in so many ways. And I've got so much more to do, so much more to experience yet. And I want that for everyone to find that peace. And I'm not going to say sit in peace every day, because I'm still challenged. I'm a single mum. I'm got 2 teenagers. I'm running a business, and I'm still working on all of these things from alignment and from presence. And when I move into lack or I move into challenge, then this is my greatest gift in that moment, to find clarity and clear and come back to my heart, so I can make creative choices, not from survival, but from love. And then that creates a new pathway every time I do that. Not through when I'm comfortable, not through when I'm killing it, but when I'm challenged. And when I move through them with such grace and love for myself, it also changes how my kids see me move through challenges. The trust that they have in me doesn't waver. My love doesn't change for them. And that's not because they need to be perfect for me or I need to be perfect for them. It's because there's a deep acceptance for what is, for their experience. They don't have to make me feel comfortable, and I don't have to make them feel comfortable. We just have to be really real in this reality of life. And how do we come back to love and alignment in as many now moments as we can? And to me, that's the gift. That's the expansion. That's where we're all wanting to move to clear this denser frequency from the body, from our humanness, to remember. So this isn't just about the nervous system and creating calmness and bypassing what's really in here. This is giving you the foundation to change what you were built on. The untruths, the patterns, the programs, the beliefs. To really see yourself in separation, so that you can work deeply to remember, to open up the cells of your body, to release, and then also to open up those cells that have been so bogged down with that heavy stuff that they didn't have any time to move out of survival to experience the expansion of what we can in this human body. And I feel that's the fun part of what we're learning, what we're growing through. But there's always going to be a sense of loss, a loss of identity, a death of self to birth something new. And we're seeing that all around us at the moment. So if we can just anchor and do our part in our own self and relate to that differently, then that gives that opportunity and permission to our kids and everybody around us. And then step by step, life starts to change. We co-create differently with life. And there's much more peace that comes with that. And there's presence with that. And even when life hasn't necessarily changed in the sense of what we would expect it to look like, there's a knowingness that it already has happened. There's a knowingness that it's there, that you already have it, and when it is ready and it's the right time and it's for your soul's highest good, it lands. It comes. And we're not looking outside of ourselves because we know it already is. And there's something so really beautiful about that I think for me has given me this really deep sense of self, deep sense of security that I just never felt in my life, because I felt so separate. I felt so different. I looked at the world differently. I felt the world differently. And that felt like a burden for me most of my life. And now it's a gift. I feel like this is game time. This is the time for all of us that have felt separate, that have adapted, that have overfunctioned, that have suppressed, that in our humanness, when we know that on the other side of that veil that we're trying to reach all the time through doing more, being more, that we come home. We go within, because what's within is where we change it. We change our reality. We change our perception. We open up the expansion beyond what we can ever believe we had access to. And I really want that. And, I come back to my foundations of self because it's a way of being. It's a way of relating to self, which changes all relationship. And understanding that part of your humanness and your adaptations and survival mechanisms set you free. Set you free to reclaim yourself and see yourself in separateness to what you created as a child, to be you, to the expansion of who you really are, how to master yourself and your energy, how to co-create with life. So building a foundation is where I always go back to my foundation. And then I can always go in if there's anything that feels like I haven't claimed. I get to hold that. And then I also get to vision, open, expand into what I already know is ready for me. And I just build my capacity every day to hold that. And that's my only job. And I want to show you how to do that. And I'm not showing you from a place that I haven't walked. And I've walked the path. And I feel like so clearly now, this is my path. And through my foundations of self, through my Becoming Whole membership, if you're not ready to jump and dive right in because you feel really overwhelmed, start in my Becoming Whole membership. Use those little daily things to build some consistency and day-to-day self-reflection to expand into coming into the Evergreen course that I run twice a year, 2 live coaching that you have access to lifetime, for life. It's not one and done. You can come in and out of the course anytime you like because I know what it's like to move through seasons and then having to come back and review it and come back to those basics again. And because then you can absorb and expand into more understanding of it. So I run 2 6-week live April and October every year. For that reason that you can come in and out of that course for life. And you have access. Because every time I expand, the group expands and the frequency expands. And so that work deepens. And you will access more every time your nervous system can hold more. Reclaim more of yourself. And expand more into what you're ready to receive. So I'm really deeply honoured. And I'm going to be coming in here and dropping in with little transmissions, dropping in with little Mel's musings, dropping in with some notes and opening my voice a little more because I know that is something that holds a lot for a lot of people and a lot of place that right now we need community, we need places to co-regulate together because co-regulation in community, not out of trauma, but out of deeply doing this work together, helps us expand. And I want to offer those little communities through the Aligned Tribe for our Foundations of Self group, then the Becoming Whole, which is a monthly membership. I want to keep creating these spaces that people can co-regulate with honesty about doing the work and facing themselves and reclaiming themselves from the shadows of the past to be able to expand to what we're ready to become, and that is whole. Whole to open up to what we're ready to create. And I can't wait to walk beside you in that. And I'm honoured that you listen and you're here, and I'm looking forward to co-creating and walking beside you on any space in your path that you're at, even if it's just through this podcast, even if it's just through coming into the Becoming Whole or really moving into the deep dive of Foundations of Self and beyond. So thank you for listening. That's my little Mel's musing for the day, and I'm looking forward to connecting again. And you'll hear me a lot more often, and soon to start to bring some guests into the spirituality. I'm going to do it online this time and do a season online until I can expand back into a studio. There's a part of me that started in a place that I loved and then felt like I couldn't do it anymore because it wasn't perfect and I wanted to do it in the studio. But I feel right now maybe online to be able to connect and to keep those conversations flowing with people that I know will bring so much deep insight to your growth, to your life, to moving through these challenging times and finding a place to remember yourself. So loving you. Have a beautiful day. Bye.